Okay, if you have a Bible and you find it helpful, please open it to Luke chapter 3. This is where we'll be spending our time. We have an idiom in our language. Now, that's a funny word. There are a couple of words to me that are funny. Idiom is one of them. Jumbo is another. That's a funny word to me. I don't know why. But an idiom is a turn of phrase, a turn of our language that means something else. We use it, but it means something else. One of my favorite ones, and I learned it from a guy I used to work for, he used to say, if something, you got your finger squished, you got it mashed flat as a dime, which is pretty bad mashing to make that flat as a dime. But these kinds of idioms, we use them all the time, and one of them is called learning the ropes. Now, I thought about that idiom. I thought, I know what it means. It means you've kind of learned your way through something like a job or something like that. But I thought, where does that come from? And I thought about it for a while, and I realized it's a nautical thing. It comes from the old sailing ships where you had a dozen sails, and each one of them had a rope connected to it, where you as a deckhand, I were a deckhand, we had to know what each rope did in order to be any use on the boat. That's where the phrase comes from. Well, Jesus literally has come to 30 years of age. He's been baptized by John the Baptist. The Spirit of God has come, and he has spent those 30 years learning the ropes. He's learned to be the Jewish man that he was. And now God is taking all of that Jesus is and is now going to use it in something new. I'm going to begin reading in verse 23, and you'll have to forgive me for this text. I didn't write it, but it's a difficult text. But we're going to go through it, and I'll explain why in just a moment. Verse 23 of chapter 3, now Jesus himself was 30 years old when he began his ministry. He was the son, so it was thought, of Joseph, the son of Heli, the son of Matthat, the son of Levi, the son of Melchi, the son of Jani, the son of Joseph, the son of Mattathias, the son of Amos, the son of Naaman, the son of Esli, the son of Nagai, the son of Maath, the son of Mattathias, the son of Simeon, the son of Joseph, the son of Joda, the son of Joan, the son of Resa, the son of Zerubbabel, the son of Shealtiel, the son of Neri, the son of Melchi, the son of Adi, the son of Kosam, the son of El-Madam, the son of that was an easy one, the son of Joshua, the son of Eleazar, the son of Jorim, the son of Matthat, the son of Levi, the son of Simeon, the son of Judah, the son of Joseph, the son of Jonam, the son of Eli-Caim, the son of Maleah, the son of Manor, the son of Mattatha, the son of Nathan, the son of David, the son of Jesse, the son of Obed, the son of Boaz, the son of Salmon, the son of Nashon, the son of Amminadab, the son of Ram, the son of Hezron, the son of Perez, the son of Judah, the son of Jacob, the son of Isaac, the son of Abraham, the son of Terah, the son of Nahor, the son of Serug, the son of Reu, the son of Peleg, the son of Eber, the son of Shelah, the son of Cainan, the son of Arphaxad, the son of Shem, the son of Noah, the son of Lamech, the son of Methuselah, the son of Enoch, the son of Jared, the son of Mahalalel, the son of Canaan, the son of Enosh, the son of Seth, the son of Adam, the son of God. Everybody was just waiting to see which one of those I'd stumble over, weren't you? Just want to see which one of those strange names that we don't find in our baby books Rip's going to get tangled up with. I practiced.
We wouldn't know that.
So Jesus, well, you might if I'd have stopped. You would have said, boy, he got tangled up with that one.
The only one I could pronounce was Earth.
Was a pretty easy one. I got that one right away. Jesus has been in preparatory school his whole life for 30 years. And here he is now prepared, and he's been faithful in everything. Jesus is different from every other Jewish man of 30 years of age at that point in history. He's different from every other Jewish man who's ever lived because he's been absolutely faithful in everything Jewish right up to this very moment. All of the small things, as we looked at last week, taking care of his family as the eldest son until he was 30, when some of the other children perhaps had grown to an age when they could take care of the family if Jesus departed to do what it was that God had given him to do. So he'd done it all perfectly. And this is part of why Jesus could do what he did when he taught the parable that we looked at last week in Matthew 25 of the talents. He could teach that parable because he'd been there. I remember when I used to do heavy construction. Now, heavy construction doesn't mean you just lift heavy things. It means that you're doing construction that is much bigger than residential construction, which is what I now do. You're building bridges and power plants and dams and tall buildings. That's heavy construction. And when the foreman was sick, they'd say, well, you got a crew of 20 people maybe. Who's going to run the crew? So what they would do is they would get one of the engineers out of the office. Then the engineer would come out in a nice pressed shirt, little pocket protector with pins sticking out of it. Hard hat was all shiny, didn't have a mark on it. Clearly he'd never done anything in it. Clean pressed pants and shoes that weren't all marked up and burned. Our shoes all had burn marks where welding slag had fallen on them and scuffed up on rebar and everything else. The engineer just stood out in a crowd of us because he was the only one that was clean. And every worker, which I was one of them, hated that. Now, they didn't hate the engineer. He was a nice enough guy. It was that he had never done what we were doing, ever. He'd never had somebody tell him to climb up 140 feet on a ladder and go up and grease the pulleys at the top of the crane boom. He'd never done that. He'd never had somebody say, go out there and take this fire hose and wash this pour down before we put concrete in it, where you got to have 3 people to hold the hose because there's so much pressure behind it. If there's just one, you're going for a ride. He'd never worked in the heat. He'd never worked in the cold. He'd never done any of that stuff. And so when they would send an engineer, it was really hard for us to respect that person. The foreman, he had climbed up, and I say he, most of them were he's. There were a couple of women. The foreman had climbed up through the ranks, started out as a laborer, had learned the trade, and had finally gotten so good at it that the company realized they could use him to help run the crew. We respected that. But when they sent that clean, shiny engineer out there, he doesn't even know what he's doing out here. We didn't have respect for it. This is what makes Jesus unique. He did all the stuff. He had lived as a common Jew in a poor, poor family. He had come underneath everybody. And so Jesus could stand in front of people and say to them, teach them. That's what you remember it says in the text. They heard Jesus. Jesus spoke to as one with authority, not like the scribes and the Pharisees. They were just teaching from a book. They were qualified to teach from the book, but they weren't qualified to teach from having lived any of it. Jesus lived all of it, and he lived it in the lowly, lowly way. How many times do we read of some biography of somebody who we read their biography and they're famous people, but you recognize when you read the biography, they've never lived like you and me. They've never had to worry about their income or worry about their health or worry about going to the doctor or worry about much of anything. And yet they write a book, and somehow this book is supposed to be important to us. Jesus worried about all that stuff and more than you and I in this room will ever know. Now, there's a difference if you read this genealogy, and look, I'm just like you are. I mean, when I get to the genealogies, I read really fast because they don't hold a lot of water for me. I don't read them with the importance that a Jewish person at this time in history would have read this genealogy. They'd been very interested to trace all of this back. This genealogy reads very different from Matthew's genealogy of Jesus, and the scholars have thought about this for centuries. Why is that? They've reasoned that it's because Luke's genealogy is for Mary. That's why you see the different names in it. And there's one little distinction that's very important that the scholars puzzled over for a long time. And it is the fact that the father of Joseph is given as Heli in Luke. It's given as Jacob in Matthew. Why is that? The Jews had a practice that was known as levirate marriage. How did that work? Well, if you were married to so-and-so and you died and you had an unmarried brother, the brother it was almost an obligation, was to marry your wife so that she would not be without a husband. Because in that culture, women couldn't be without husbands. They would starve to death unless they were prostitutes. I mean, there wasn't anything for women to do without a husband at that time in history. So that makes sense to me as far as why these two lineages would show up different for Joseph like that, because likely as not, there was a levirate marriage somewhere in that history. But these Jewish names all mean something. Now, you might puzzle yourself. We in the Protestant Christian tradition, after Paul does this, although in the Greek it's reversed. It's always Christos Iousis. It's Christ Jesus, not Jesus Christ. And a lot of times we grow up, Jesu Christo, we grow up with the idea that's kind of like Jesus' last name or something. I mean, that's how a lot of people read it. But that's not what it means at all. Jesus' name would have been Yeshua Bar Yosef. That would have been his name for all the Jews. That's how they would have understood his name. Jesus, the son of Joseph. That's how he would have been known. And Matthew, the genealogies are different in one more respect that's really important. Matthew's genealogy is extraordinarily Jewish. Now, all of these are Jewish people, I realize that, but Luke is stressing something different in his. He traces it all the way back to God. Matthew stops with Abraham. Why is that? What's important to Matthew is he's Jewish. What's important to Luke is he's connected to all of humanity. Luke's a Gentile. He doesn't have this Jewishness from which he comes, so he's not going to look at a genealogy in the same way that a Jewish person would look at it at all. He's kind of looking at it sort of like we would in some ways. And what's important to him is he's the son of all of humanity, the Son of God. Now, I like the genealogy in one respect. I don't like to read them because they're, like I say, I'm just a normal Gentile Protestant like all of you. It doesn't have the significance for me that I wish it did. But one thing it does do is it tells me something about Jesus that's really important to me. You know, we just finished praying. We heard that song of Suzanne's, Better Than a Hallelujah. And we want as people, I know I do, maybe I'm the only one. We want as people to be able to come to God just like little children with all of the things that we're concerned about. I do, don't you? Don't you want to be able to just come to Him with all the little stuff, the stuff that worries you, worries me, or worries us about somebody else? Want to be able to come to Him and talk to Him about those things. These genealogies give us permission because they show us something about who Jesus is. He's a son of the earth as much as He's a son of God. He's one of us. He's a person. He has had to go through all of the struggles that any person, and more so, just in being a Jewish man at this time in history and coming from this poor family. In Jewish society, there was a stratification of families, a stratification of people. We have it too, right? People get elected to Congress and they think they're somebody all of a sudden. They forgot that maybe they were selling shoes 20 years ago and now they're a congressperson, so now they're somebody. Or somebody is in a movie and they're somebody. They forget who they really are. God in Jesus comes underneath everybody completely. There is nobody that Jesus didn't come underneath in His culture and in ours. And so how could we learn when we come to church? How many times have you come into a church service and had a pastor or a teacher or somebody talk about loving God? I don't know that we could do that without Jesus. I don't know that we could. It would be so hard because we don't have somebody that comes to us who is approachable like we approach one another. But then there's Jesus, who lived in this very humble family and did all of these things. He identified with humanity. This is why what happens, how the gospel message is so important. It's so important because God Himself has come and identified with humanity. He's not, as Eugene Peterson says it well, God got down on His knees. He gets down on our level and shares himself with us. He doesn't reside far off and send us diplomatic messages. He comes and enters into who we are. I need that. I need that. And so one of the great barriers in knowing God, one of the great barriers in serving God, one of the great barriers in saying I love God is taken away because I can see Jesus. I can see him. Now, this idea of the lowly, we don't quite capture what lowly is in our culture. I mean, we think of ourselves here in Manor or Waycross or in the country or whatever, or this part of the country as lowly by comparison to many parts of the country. And we're seen that way to some degree, which is a strange thing. But we don't understand lowly in the way that Jesus is trying to, in the way that God through Jesus is trying to get us to understand lowly. We can't be any more than him. And yet he's come underneath all of us. He's come underneath everybody. Look at Jesus' life, all right? Here you take God, all right, the maker of the universe. He spread the heavens out. And then in the fullness of time, he decides, I'm going to enter into humanity and become one of them, whom I made. So he does, but he doesn't come in like a king. He doesn't come in like God. He comes in, he first of all goes through the rigors of being born as a human being, which in that culture, the mortality rate was way over 50%. So it's a dangerous thing to be born, right? And he's not born in a hospital. He's born outdoors. And when he's born with no assistance whatsoever, Joseph couldn't have been a whole lot of help. When he's born, there's no place to keep him. They're not even indoors. What are you going to do? So they put him in a feeding trough. All right? He has to grow up in a household, and as I said before, there was a stratification in Jewish society. The lowest person in Jewish society was the foot washing slave that some of the wealthier households had. The next person up the rungs from zero were the shepherds. The next person up the rung was a carpenter. There were a lot of rungs above carpenter, lots of rungs. And Jesus grew up in a carpenter's household and learned that trade. It's not like the trade we understand it to be today. So and then the worst of all, and I've pointed out this every Christmas, this always strikes me at Christmas time. Think of it. And this is the image that comes to me, so you'll have to relive it with me again. I'm sorry about that. Sitting around prior to the birth, go over to Joe's house for dinner. Mary and Joseph. Mary's showing. Everybody knows she's pregnant. Joe says, it's not me. Well, how does everybody feel around the table, you suppose? And then Jesus, right, exactly. And Jesus grows up with that to the point that in John 8, remember, he's in that conflict with the Pharisees. What do they say to him? Well, gosh, Jesus, we know who our fathers are. What's the implication? You don't. You cannot be more underneath humanity than that. In that culture, to be seen as, and I say this with reverence, to be seen as an illegitimate person, son or daughter, that was a pretty bad place to be. You talk about a scarlet letter, it was a big one. What does it teach us? It's got to mean something, right? I mean, all of this humility's got to mean something to us. What does it mean? It means a lot. Jesus is showing us what our calling is in the world. Every person in this room. What is that calling? Well, the first place of that calling, besides coming to Jesus and being born again, is once that occurs, we are called to never ever have a perspective of being over anybody else in this world, no matter who they are. No matter what color their skin, no matter what their socioeconomic background, no matter how they dress, no matter what their culture, if they come in here and they got feathers and a bone through their nose, because that's their culture. They're not savages. We can never ever look at any human being in the way that we might think to look at human beings if we didn't have that filter of who Jesus is in front of us. I can't imagine a more important feature for what it is to be a human being and for what it is to be a Christian than that. Because that means that anybody that comes through our doors back here to this church service, if it's an imam, if it's a former suicide bomber, if it's a former terrorist, if it's a thug, if it's a drug addict, if it's a prostitute, if it's whoever it is, if they come through that door, we have one calling, and that's to love them and accept them. If we get two guys coming in here holding hands because they're thinking themselves married, we're to love them and accept them. We don't have to endorse what they're doing, but we have to love them. We have to accept them. This is what Jesus' message is in coming underneath. Here's the maker of the universe. What's his message? I've come underneath everybody. Now you do the same. You remember Jesus, he's in the upper room. Last Supper. And he does something extraordinary. He takes off his cloak and puts a towel around himself, and he gets a basin of water, and he goes around and he washes the disciples' feet, which, remember what I said, in the Jewish household, the lowest person in Jewish society was the foot washing slave. And Jesus does that. Remember Peter, good Jewish boy, he says, no, you're not going to do that. Well, if you're going to do it, then wash all of me. And Jesus says, if you don't allow me to do this, you've no part in me. Gosh, Jesus said some hard stuff. I wouldn't have, I say this again with reverence, I would not have wanted to have been a disciple, to walk with him. Some of the stuff he said was just positively terrifying. People talk about Jesus as meek and mild. He was that. He was terrifying too. So we come to this and we say, well, this sounds awfully hard. It is hard. It is hard. Go to a nursing home sometime where something has happened to the person you're visiting, where their bodies have done something that for you and me would just be the most incredible embarrassment you could possibly imagine. It's hard. It's hard to love through stuff like that. It is for me. And yet, that's what he's commanding us to do. By his life, not by his words. You have to love people no matter who they are, no matter what they've done. If they're sitting behind a jail cell, in a jail cell behind bars, talking to you on a telephone because they've killed somebody, we have to love them. We have to. And it's going to cost us something. It always does. It always does. But that cost, I'm a Christian who likes to come at following Jesus with my eyes wide open. I don't want to come at it thinking it's one way and it's really not. I want to hear the worst of it. I want to hear the worst stuff right away because I want to know what I'm getting myself into. This is why, as a Christian, the real gospel doesn't draw a lot of people. Pieces of the gospel draw a lot of people, but the real gospel doesn't draw a lot of people. Remember Jesus? He said, if you don't eat my flesh and drink my blood, you have no part in me. There were a bunch of people. Most of them left. And the disciples scratched their heads and said, if you hadn't said that, things would have been a lot easier. Well, they didn't understand what he meant. But it's the same for us. If we bring the whole gospel, there are a lot of people who are going to turn away from us. That's the nature of the gospel. Jesus offends everybody at some point. And that eyes wide open perspective sometimes can be a deterrent to people coming in. It can. Because everything in our lives is sifted through who we are, how we were raised, where we came from, our socioeconomic background, our intelligence, what we thought was important, all of these features, how our childhood went, all of that influences who we are as Christians. Maybe something terrible we went through at some point as an adult. And then we come to Jesus and all of that affects it. It's all affected. It's colored by those features of who we are. But God wants us to set all of that aside and remember a couple of things. While we were weak, at the right time, Jesus died for us. While we were sinners, he died for us. He expects us to look at other people in the same way, always. You can take it safely as a command of Scripture on the basis of Jesus' life. We have to accept everybody. And God does that. That's why. Think of it this way, and here's a challenge. Challenge for me. We have to accept even the Hitlers of the world. Right? Stop and think for a moment. All the terrible things he did. There was a time in his life when he was a little boy with his mom and dad. They loved him. Right? That's how God still looks at him, even though he's doing terrible things. You know, God's heart gets broken twice every time these things happen. You know how that is? One thing, it breaks over the victims. When you get a person like a Hitler or a Saddam or anybody else, God's heart breaks for those victims. Remember in Revelation, the aroma, the smoke of the martyrs, the aroma of the martyrs goes up to God. But it also breaks for the tyrant, because God never wanted that person to be that person. His heart's broken for him too. Pursuing God is the best we can do, but we're going to fail at it. But be encouraged. Go ahead and fail. Pursue God. Accept people, love people, fail. And God will just pick you right back up, dust you off, and say, you go and do better next time. I don't know where everybody is, but if I've said anything about which you've got a question, you want to pray with me, speak with me, talk with me after the service about this church, about your life with the Lord, I'll be glad to speak with you. I'll stay as long as it takes as Lottie comes to close.